Today we're diving into patch 14.5 in season 2024, and we're going to see how the meta is looking with tons more buffs, nerfs and changes to League of Legends' strongest and weakest champions. So let's start off with the top lane as usual, and not too many buffs or changes aimed at this role really this time round, apart from a cheeky item buff to Heartsteel. The main top laner that is being changed this week is Yorick, and the armor and MR of his maiden is being increased, but it no longer takes 50% less AoE damage. His E curse target bonus damage is also being reduced from 30 to 20% as well. It's intriguing to see how much impact these changes have, but generally speaking at lower ranks, Yorick always tends to be a problem, and at higher ranks, not so much. Twisted Fate has been completely broken recently though in several different roles. But the top lane is where he just simply doesn't belong, and he's been causing way too many issues with fleet footwork, spacing, trading around his E, and just removing top lane players' ability to play the game. This patch TF's E has had its bonus attack speed reduced and the bonus AD ratio significantly reduced too. So we've moved him down to the A tier for now, but it could go either way. Riot are attempting to keep ADTF in the game as a viable meta pick, but will it still be viable if it keeps getting nerfed and gets a bit too weak? We're just gonna have to wait and see how this one pans out. Zac has also been on the strong side for a while now, and he's been popping up in various roles including the top lane where his win rate and pick rate has really shot up recently. In patch 14.5, his passive healing has been reduced based on his ultimate's rank, and his W base damage has actually gone up though. He's one of those champions that's not too difficult to play and pretty easy to be impactful on, so despite the changes, he still should be a solid pick to go for. Volibear is an absolute raid boss at the moment after his buffs last patch, and he's easily been one of the biggest problems to play against in both the top lane and in the jungle. His AP tank or pure tank builds are just incredibly strong, and the Lucidity Boots Hollow Radiance Winter's Approach combo is absolutely bonkers. Volibear has some surprising damage and can tank entire teams by himself when he gets ahead. So with a patch this week with no nurse for him, enjoy it while you still can. Well, unless you made AD carry. So in the S tier we have Aatrox, Camille, Darius, Fiora, Gragas, Karma, Kayle, Malphite, Olaf, Urgot and Volibear. Olaf is now back up in the S tier after proving we shouldn't be forgetting about him anytime soon. Kayle and Malphite continue to be super strong picks, especially so at lower ranks or in those really good matchups. And Urgot carries on being one of the scariest picks in the top lane to play against right now. Well, let's get into the jungle next, and this is where a huge part of this patch's changes are happening, with plenty of nerfs, some buffs, and some big changes too. S tier junglers Bel'Veth, Evelynn, Nidalee, and Brand all received nerfs this patch, some bigger than others. Brand is getting a double nerf to his ultimate, hitting its damage and its cooldown, which is fairly expected and kinda welcome, because he's been stomping the tier list in various roles with incredible win rates in the jungle, bot lane, and the mid lane too. Evelynn's Q is being hit pretty hard this week as well, which will not only affect her clear times but also her burst into her ultimate's range at the same time. We expect this nerf to finally knock her down a peg or two. Those Eve OTPs have been loving their lives for a very long time now, so this patch could be the patch that hits her hard enough to actually make a difference. Nidalee is getting her base movement speed nerfed and her Cougar form Q damage hit too, and after a relatively brief but very strong period of domination, these changes could really hurt her. We've moved Nidalee, Evelynn and Brand all down from S to A this week, but we'll check back in a few days after the patch to see the results. Rek'Sai's rework didn't really go to plan initially, and it just felt like it needed a bit more testing before hitting live servers. Well, this patch, Riot have changes and fixes to plenty of her issues, from auto attack animation improvements to general buffs to her E and her ultimate. We're going to move her up to the A tier this week, so let's see how she gets on. If you want to stay up to date with Rek'Sai's builds and runes, then don't forget to click the link in the description and head to our website where you can see the highest performing builds, the most popular builds, and make sure you're ahead of everyone else. Jarvan and Wukong have both been struggling for a while now too, so they also both get a bit of love here, with J4's cooldown on his Q being buffed and Wukong's passive getting some improvements. Finally, despite blue Kayn being very strong recently, red Kayn is now getting buffed too, which now cements his place in the S tier this patch. Speaking of the S tier, we have Bel'Veth, Briar, Ivern, Kayn, Kha'Zix, Master Yi, Viego and Volibear. Yes, you heard us correctly, Bel'Veth keeps her place this week, as we feel the nerfs to her E won't stop her from doing her thing. Volibear is back up there with the big guns just like in the top lane, and other picks like Viego and Master Yi continue to be a real problem. The A tier is also stacked full of amazing options like Gragas, Lee Sin, Kindred and Xin Zhao, so plenty of choice for all you jungle mains to get stuck into. Now let's get into the mid lane, and first off we have some nerfs to Lichbane and some buffs to Storm Surge and Rocket Bell. There isn't really too many changes aimed at specific champions in this role this patch, but we do have a few buffs to go over. Veigar is getting his AP ratio on his Q increased, as well as his ultimate's cooldown being reduced. These buffs are actually pretty damn good, to be honest. I mean, Veigar hasn't really been relevant for a long time, but we could see a bit of a comeback here, especially so at lower ranks. We're also intrigued to see if this makes Veigar reappear in the bot lane, as 20 seconds off his ultimate cooldown at rank 1 is pretty insane. Vex's passive damage and AP ratio is increased, and killing units with her E now grants her passive refund, which is a great change and would definitely help Vex out. The weird thing is though, is that Vex doesn't really feel that weak in the right games. She just has a lot of drafts that are kinda unplayable. She's very one-dimensional as a champion. Go in with your ultimate, get those resets, win the game. But if you don't do this because of various enemy champions' mobility or survivability, it's really hard to do your thing. In the right matchups and team comps, Vex is definitely stronger than she seems though, so give her a go if you haven't played her recently, because these buffs will make her feel even better. Ahri is well and truly back in the S tier though, after a couple of buffs have sent her back to where she belongs. This incredibly popular fan favourite champion has been a little bit out of the loop for a while, so it's about time she came back into the meta. Not only has Ahri received some buffs recently, but so has Malignance too, which is proving to be an absolutely awesome item to build on her, getting that ultimate cooldown super duper low and making her so much more impactful throughout all stages of the game. Speaking of Malignance users, Karma is still dominating those top tiers in both of the solo lanes, at pretty much all ranks too. Her Malignance, Lucidity Boots, Cosmic Drive and Crypt Bloom build gives her some seriously high damage, amazing utility, constant ability cooldowns and plenty of movement, making her feel incredibly hard to punish and crazy strong into all sorts of comps and drafts. If you haven't played Karma yet, you are seriously missing out, because it really is kinda OP. So how does the mid lane tier list look then? Well, in the S tier we have Ahri, Aurelion Sol, Cassiopeia, Gragas, Karma, Kassadin, Sylas, Taliyah and Twisted Fate. Yes, Asol and Cassadin continue to be a problem. Twisted Fate remains up top despite his AD nerfs and the nerfs to Lichbane, and A tier picks like Akali, Anivia, Aurelia and Katarina are ones to watch out for here too. Let's get down to those AD carries next then, and it's safe to say that bot lane mains aren't exactly having the most amount of fun right now. And with the only real S tier AD carry picks being nerfed this patch, we're really interested to see how the meta shapes up here. Vayne has been a solid meta pick for a while now, with various builds from on-hit attack speed to Q-max lethality and a bunch of different ways to build her in between. But this patch she's getting a fairly big nerf to her passive movement speed and her Q's cooldown too. We predict this one will have enough impact to bring her down from S to A. In the right matchups and games she's still going to be a really good option, but this will affect her trading and spacing, hindering her early game again and making her less consistent. Smolder has been an abomination to balance since his release, because no matter what happens, as soon as you get those stacks built up and get your Elder Dragon passive, you farm pentakills easier than any champions in the history of the game. Well, except maybe release in Zhao. Sorry, I've been playing this game for way too long. This patch is getting a ton of changes again though, and we won't go into every single detail because we'll be here until next season. But even with all these adjustments, we are going to keep him in the S tier for now, and let's see if they really do make a difference to bring him back down to reality. Seraphine is another S tier bot laner that has been shining in this season so far, and this patch Riot are attempting to shift her away from the bot lane and back into a support again, with buffs to her supporting playstyle and nerfs to her damage and endless wave clear. We've moved Seraphine down to the A tier this week for bot lane, but let's see if she remains S tier, moves to the D tier, or just disappears from this role altogether. Let's have a look at our tier list in this patch for the AD carries then. And in the S tier we have Smolder, Senna, Jinx, Twitch and Ashe. With the S tier machines being nerfed this patch like Vayne, Twisted Fate and Seraphine, we expect the other AD carries that have been performing consistently well come up into the spotlight. Ashe, Jinx and Twitch have all had impressive stats recently, but just been overshadowed by the OP choices above them. Sivir gets a small buff, Kog'Maw gets some fairly big buffs, so keep an eye out for those ones too. And Senna gets an AD nerf to her Q, but she's been so broken, we aren't going to move her out of the S tier just yet. Finally, let's get on to those supports next, and first up we've got some buffs to Dreammaker and Celestial Opposition, and nerfs to Solstice Slay and Frozen Heart. No buffs for any supports this week though, just the big changes to Seraphine and nerfs to Brand, Maokai and Senna. Speaking of Senna, we really just need to talk about how strong this champion has been so far this season, boasting crazy win rates in both the bot lane roles across every single rank. So finally it is good to see some kind of nerf in the patch notes for her this week. Her Q AD damage ratio is being hit by 10% down from 50 to 40, which is a good start, but we don't think it's enough to take her out of the S tier in either role. She's just too strong in the early game for such a high scaling champion, and without any nerfs to her early laning phase, she's going to continue to scale up 9 times out of 10 without being punished, which means she almost always hits that point where she just 1v9s every single game. One support that is really rising through the ranks recently though is Leona, and if you look at her performance over recent weeks, she's really starting to prove she's also a really solid option to go for. Leona's tanky support build includes rushing Locket into Zeke's and then just getting stuck in and CCing as many enemies as possible. Leona is the perfect pick if your team has a load of damage that she can just provide that CC setup for, so give her a go. Pyke has also been destroying games since his buffs recently, which shot him back up into those top tiers. He is the perfect support to carry solo queue with right now, because he's great in the early 2v2s in lane, but also if your AD carry isn't too great, you can just abandon ship, roam around the map and snowball the rest of the game instead. He has solid CC, mobility and those ultimate resets, but his actual damage this season is surprisingly strong too, with all those lethality items still being fantastic options. Maokai gets another nerf as expected again this patch, this time to his W's cooldown and his base movement speed, but seeing just how strong he's been this season, we don't think it's enough yet to dethrone him. In this patch, Riot have also buffed his Q's damage to monsters, so it seems like they are trying to shift this guy back into the jungle. Maokai has been insanely broken all season so far, so it's about time he gave someone else the spotlight. So how is the support tier list looking then? Well, in the S tier we have Blitzcrank, Janna, Leona, Maokai, Pyke, Rakan, Senna, Thresh and Zyra. Zyra moves back up to the S tier after performing really well recently, especially so at lower ranks. Strong consistent meta picks like Rakan, Blitz and Janna continue to perform really well across the board, and still plenty of great options in the A tier too, like Bard, Alistar, Soraka and Rell. Well, that brings us to the end of our patch 14.5 tier list video. We hope you guys enjoyed this video and let us know in the comments who you're looking forward to playing this patch. Before you go, don't forget to head to our website by clicking the link below and see all the best champion builds, runes, combos and so much more. Thanks for watching guys, and as always, take care.